What's going on, big girls? Welcome back into the BDGE Dynasty channel. If you're new to the channel, make sure you go down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content that we're bringing to you here weekly on the game of Dynasty. Now, as promised, today what I'm going to do is kind of get into the value of first round picks, essentially what the players become that you're drafting in the first round, taking a look at ADP data from the 2019 to the 2023 season, seeing what the players have become as far as Dynasty value goes of those first round picks. Andrew did a two-part series talking about round one and round two as far as what these players' hit rates are on the production side. Today I'm going to be getting into the first round and the value overall of these players. One of the biggest things for me when taking a look at first round picks really is value insulation, and I think you can rely on value insulation for the most part from rookie picks in the first round. So we're going to see if that confirms my bias there, this data that we're going to get into. But before we get into all that, you already know what we got to do. Let's tuck them, man. Tuck these shirts in. Stop yapping. It's time to eat. All right, so let's dive right into this. And we're talking about the first round data, essentially the rookies that you're drafting by ADP and Sleeper in real money leagues over the last 5 years. Obviously, that's a much different conversation than last week's video, the second round picks. There's a very big difference in perception and the way that people value first round and second round picks, rightfully so to a degree. So when we take a look back at time, keep value insulation in the back of your mind as we go through this information. We're going to start in 2023 and then work our way back all the way to the 2019 class. All right, so taking a look last year at the 2023 class, seeing all the picks here in the first round, there was one thing pretty universally on Dynasty last year, which was kind of a tier break, and people really viewed the class falling off somewhere between the 106 and the 107, and that a lot was really based on the perception and view of JSN. JSN was kind of thought to be separated from the pack, but then he didn't get drafted until the 20th pick overall to the Seattle Seahawks, and they also had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett there. So those two guys' presence, plus the fact that it was Geno Smith at the helm, people weren't necessarily as in on JSN as they were pre-draft once the landing spot came out. Bijan Robinson, the 101, he currently right now today is valued as the overall 11th player, running back 1. A. Rich, overall 12th player, currently quarterback 6. Bryce Young was 26th overall as far as all the players go on Keep Trade Cut shortly after the NFL draft, so that was in early May. He has fallen from 26 to 76. Then you got Jahmyr Gibbs, currently overall player 17, running back 3. CJ Stroud, overall player 4, quarterback. Obviously a huge riser and one of the most highly desired assets in Dynasty right now. Then we get to this 106 spot here, which is JSN, and there's definitely some differing views on JSN as far as what he's going to be going into year 2. Some people are really bullish and still believe in the talent of JSN, and some people think that his underwhelming rookie stats really kind of make him not the same player, or the way that they viewed the player, so to speak, with him going into his rookie season. But now JSN, he's overall player 58, wide receiver 25. Jordan Addison, wide receiver 29, overall 74 on Keep Trade Cut. Then you have Quentin Johnson, who has fallen a ton. Obviously, he was a face planter, had a pretty horrible rookie season. Wide receiver 65 overall and 174th player on Keep Trade Cut. 2520 is his Dynasty value. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 22, overall 57. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 3, overall 46. Zach Charbonnet, running back 29, overall 131. And then you have Devon Achane, who went from overall player 105 after the NFL draft all the way up to overall player 42. Even though he had an injury-riddled season, some massive blow-up weeks out of Devon Achane. So that's the 2023 class currently as it stands. Obviously, we just drafted those players in last year's rookie class. Somewhere in May, typically, most drafts go down. So now as you take a look here going into the 2022 season, Breece Hall at the 101, he's overall currently player 14, running back 2. Drake London is currently overall player 33. He's up to wide receiver 13 now with Kirk Cousins coming over to Atlanta. Kenneth Walker, the 103 in this class, is down to overall player 64, running back 11 currently on Keep Trade Cut. Then you have Treylon Burks, a massive free faller from that 2022 class. Wide receiver 92, 1629 is his current value on Keep Trade Cut. He is overall player 250. Treylon Burks, the 104 from just a couple years ago in 2022. Garrett Wilson at 105, wide receiver 7, overall player 21. Chris Olave, overall 31, wide receiver 12 is what Chris Olave is at. Then you got Jameson Williams here. He was the 107. He's currently overall player 126 on Keep Trade Cut, and he just sneaks in the top 50 receivers, wide receiver 49. Kenny Pickett, obviously now moving on from Pittsburgh. You know what his career has really become. He's over in Philly now behind Jalen Hurts. Quarterback 47, 1,125 is his dynasty value, and he's outside the top 300, overall 326 on Keep Trade Cut. Then you have Sky Moore at the 109. He's also outside the top 300, player 316 overall in Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 115. Then you got James Cook here at the 110. He's actually up to running back 13, overall player 70. The way that Buffalo finished their year, the transformation of their offense becoming much more run heavy than they were to start the season. James Cook values actually ascended. Christian Watson in year 2 obviously dealt with a lot of injuries, so that's part of why his dynasty value is where it is today. And George Pickens currently just outside the top 50. He's overall player 57 and wide receiver 23. Obviously the departure of Deontay Johnson and all those vacated targets, combined with the fact that most people don't really view Russell Wilson that high, but they do know that he's got to be better than Kenny Pickett was for George Pickens in his career. So that's a 2022 class, right? So now we get to 2021. We got Trevor Lawrence at the 101. He's currently overall player 28, quarterback 13. Najee is running back 24, overall 117. So Najee, the former 102, he's currently outside the top 100. Then you have Kyle Pitts there at the 103 in ADP. He's tight end 5, overall player 59. Then you have Trey Lance here at the 104. Obviously, what a massive bust. He's become overall player 269. Quarterback 40, backing up Dak Prescott. Potentially, it may not even be him that's the backup. We don't necessarily know that yet in Dallas. Then you have Justin Fields at the 105. His value kind of is hanging on by a thread here. He's actually just inside the top 150, pretty much because Russell Wilson, they have no financial guarantees really to Russell Wilson to speak of. He's on the veterans minimum with Pittsburgh, and people don't really view him that highly and don't think that he's necessarily guaranteed to keep that job for the season. And if Justin Fields was to end up taking over the starting quarterback position in Pittsburgh, he would definitely get a bump in value from that 149 spot. Then you have Jamar Chase, overall player 6, wide receiver 3. He was the 106 in that class. Then you've got Travis Etienne at the 107, currently overall player 45, running back 7. Zach Wilson, obviously free faller, overall 333. And then you have Javonte Williams, overall 133. He currently is the running back 30 on Keep Trade Cut. People don't really know what to make of this Denver backfield at the moment and the way that Peyton's going to run things. Devontae Smith is currently wide receiver 16, overall player 39. Then you have Jalen Waddle, overall player 30, wide receiver 11. And then Mac Jones had a pretty decent rookie season, but is no longer a starter as well, playing in Jacksonville now, outside the top 300, overall 327. Now let's keep going, taking this trip down memory lane here. And the 2020 class, we got CEH actually was the 101 in that 2020 class. Believe it or not, it was a very big conversation, and one of the most polarizing things all offseason was, is it CEH or is it Jonathan Taylor at the 101? Despite all the talented quarterbacks in this class, the way that people viewed the running back was a lot different going into the 2020 season here. But CEH at the 101, he currently is outside of the top 300, overall player 306, former 101 in 2020 to outside the top 300. Then you have at the 102, which was obviously the right choice between those two guys, Jonathan Taylor. He's currently overall player 34 and running back 5 at the moment. Then you got Joe Burrow, quarterback 7, overall player 13. J.K. Dobbins, also outside of the top 200. He's currently 210, an injury-riddled start to his career. He's actually going to play for the other Harbaugh in L.A. So we got DeAndre Swift, currently 109, just got a pretty decent-sized contract in free agency to go play with Chicago. We'll see if that offense actually kind of can give him an opportunity to actually return value. He's outside of the top 100, running back 22 currently. CeeDee Lamb in the discussion for wide receiver 1. He's personally my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, overall player 5. Then you got Cam Akers, running back 126, currently is 397. The only bit of Dynasty value he has left, hardly any at all. 467 player on Keep Trade Cut currently. The former 107, he's a Crater Dynasty asset from that. You got Tua now, who was the 108, overall player 41 on Keep Trade Cut, quarterback 16. Then you have Jerry Jeudy, actually leaving Denver and coming to Cleveland here. 161 overall and wide receiver 60. Then you have Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 1, overall player 3 that people got at the 110 in that class. Jalen Reagor, he is the first player that is outside of the top 500. Now, Keep Trade Cut actually only keeps 500 players that you can search through on their Dynasty database. They do keep some of it because of past information. You kind of have to use a workaround to get the information on the players outside the top 500, but they're not going to be throwing those players in front of people going to click on the website Keep Trade Cut. Currently, Jalen Reagor, though, is 526 according to their data. Wide receiver 196. So Jalen Reagor from the 111, a massive bust. Then you have Justin Herbert, the pick after that. So you got quarterback 10 and overall 18. And this is after he's basically bled value all offseason. So imagine drafting Jalen Reagor, where you could have probably had a scenario of either Justin Jefferson or Justin Herbert in that spot. Pretty rough when you think back at that. 2019 class, so you got Josh Jacobs at the 101, currently overall player 82. He just got a new contract going to Green Bay. We'll see what he can do in that situation. Currently running back 15. Kyler Murray is currently quarterback 11, overall 20th on Keep Trade Cut. Them actually committing to Kyler Murray after the coaching change. People thought that maybe after Cliff Kingsbury left that they wouldn't want to have Kyler Murray, a new regime. They not only committed to him, but they doubled down and got him Marv, so his dynasty value has really regained a lot. David Montgomery is overall player 116. Then we have N'Keal Harry, another player outside of the top 500. He was someone that is a massive bust. Miles Sanders, although having some early success in his career, currently outside of the top 300, overall player 324. Then you have DK Metcalf, who is currently just inside the top 50, overall player 49. TJ Hawkinson, tight end 71, unfortunately coming off of that gruesome knee injury. You have A.J. Brown inside of the top 25, actually, overall player 24, wide receiver 8. Then you got Paris Campbell and Darrell Henderson, both outside of the top 500. Those were drafts at the 109 and 110 in ADP. Then you have Deebo Samuel at the 111, who's just inside of the top 75. He is the 75 overall player, wide receiver 29. And then Mecole Hardman, another player outside of the top 500. All right, so those are the 60 players that were drafted between 2019 and 2023, according to ADP in all sleeper money leagues. I started in 23 and kind of worked our way back. We went down memory lane, and I did that intentionally because there's a lot of things that are actually working against these players, and I kind of want to go over some things with you here when we start to think about the differences between the 2023 first round picks and then we worked our way into that 2019 class. And we know in Dynasty that everybody wants to reset the age on their team, and everybody would like to have younger assets relative to older assets. So time is obviously not on the side of any player as they continue to get older in each passing year. Not just that, right now there's so much hopium around the young players in general, whether they're just rookies that have shown us nothing, we don't have any data to go off of, or they're players like Quentin Johnson, who right now had a really horrible rookie season, but people still think with LA needing to have pass-catching weapons that it can be Quentin Johnson to really thrive in that offense next year. Right or wrong, that's keeping his dynasty value alive. And we start to think about going back through years past, that hopium eventually starts to fade away. And each passing year, the busts become more clear, and there's no longer this hopium that we can wait till next year. But not just that, the producers, the guys in that 2019 class that are actually playing really, really well. Think about a guy like A.J. Brown, 24th overall and wide receiver 8. But if you told me that A.J. Brown and all that production he had was currently 23, then obviously he wouldn't be overall player 24, and he would be definitely higher than wide receiver 8. So each passing year, even the producers are starting to get old. And then another really big point that I think is important to think about when it comes to the time working against these players is every single passing year, there's another batch of incoming rookies. So right now for the 23 class, while those guys are still young and exciting, that 24 class just came in and started to push some of the people down the board. The same thing will happen to the 23 class in 25. Right or wrong, there's going to be a ton of hype around players in that class, and will be the same case in 26 and 27, so on and so forth. Now we take a look currently at dynasty value and all the players in the 2019 to 2023 classes. Those 5 years, 4 of the top 10 players are first round picks in the classes from 19 to 23. That's Justin Jefferson, CJ Stroud, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase. Now we take a look at the top 25. 13 of those top 25 come from 19 to 2023 in the first round of rookie drafts. Then of the top 50, damn near half, 24 of those top 50 are first round picks from the years in 2019 to 2023. And then 33 of the top 75 on Keep Trade Cut, that's 55% of those players were in the first round of 2019 to the 2023 class. Now talking about value insulation and looking how as we continue to go back in time each year, looking at each class of those first round picks, there are obviously more glaring holes and massive busts. So we obviously know that the first round picks in Dynasty can really go to the moon, become some of the most desired and hard to acquire assets in the game. So obviously the upside of first round picks, I don't really need to cover too much there. But I think when we look at Dynasty value and the value insulation of first round picks, one of the things that I definitely don't want to be looking at on my team is a player that I drafted in the first round. So I used a premium pick on this player. Even if it was a late first round pick, that still is a premium asset in Dynasty. And I use that on a player, and then I see that player 2, 3, 4, 5 years removed from the time that I drafted him, and now his value is in the sewer or completely useless, and the reality is I probably need to cut him and put him on the waiver wire, you can simply get nothing for him. When you think about that, and we take a look currently at the top 50 players on Keep Trade Cut, 24 of those players, as I said, are from the classes 2019 to 2023. Now, when we start factoring in, again, futures and rookie picks and the fact that time's working against all of these players, let's bring in the 2024 class to the discussion now. So in the 2024 class, first round picks from that class, in the top 50, there's 7 of them currently inside of the top 50, which takes that 24 number to 31. So you have 31 players that were drafted in the first round of rookie drafts from 2019 to 2024 that make up the top 50. That's 62% of them. And then go ahead and make it 68% when you factor in that Keep Trade Cut does actually appropriate value for first round picks in the future, and they put future picks in the discussion and in the polls for keep trading and cutting. So right now, 34 of the top 50 assets on Keep Trade Cut were essentially first round picks that we've drafted from 2019 to this year in 2024, or future picks that aren't even players yet today. So what makes up the other 16 players? So as I covered in last week's video, 5 of those players were second round rookie picks from 2019 to 2023. There are 3 players that were actually third round picks according to ADP data. So Jalen Hurts was the 302 according to ADP. Nico Collins was also the 302 according to ADP that year. And then you have Tank Dell, who was the 308 in last year's class. Now Nico Collins and Jalen Hurts at the 302 and by ADP data, there was a very real chance in your drafts that they were either a early third or sometimes a late second. And then there was one fourth round pick, which was Puka Nacua, the massive rise in value that he had. Unbelievable rookie season for the Rams. And then you have one fifth round pick who was by ADP also Mr. Irrelevant at the 512, and that is Brock Purdy. Basically, if you had a rookie draft of 5 rounds, he was Mr. Irrelevant in that draft as well as the NFL draft. So then you add those players into the top 50. That's now 44 players that were rookies in the 2019 to 2023 season of these top 50. And then when you think about the other 6 players, there's 2 players from the 2016, 2017, and 2018 classes apiece. You have right now 2018, that's Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Then Mahomes and CMC from the 2017 class, and then the 2016 class was Tyreek Hill and Dak Prescott. And of those 6 players, 4 of them are quarterbacks that have done a ton on the field as far as production goes. So those type of players will eventually hold value longer than other positions. And then you got CMC and Tyreek Hill, right now 2 of the hardest to judge dynasty assets as far as value goes because they have absolute game-breaking ability and league-winning upside, but they are viewed as getting up there in age, and people don't want to see an injury happen to these players and their dynasty value really plummet. And obviously with all that said, time really is working against all players, even the ones that you're drafting with premium picks in the first round. So one of the things I think is important to talk about right now is this whole idea of buying low. And now when it comes to buying low, I think it's important to think about, what am I buying here? Obviously, everybody in Dynasty wants to find a way to get a good deal, find a way to buy a player on a discount, especially one that they think is going to have a chance at significant upside and payoff down the road. And while that's definitely the case, there's also the flip side of that. The converse is most people don't want to sell low. If you think there's a player that has a chance to rise in Dynasty value or kind of recoup some Dynasty value lost, there wouldn't be any reason to sell low, right? And also, if you drafted a player, let's say in the first round, now he's nowhere near a first round in value, this is a terrible time to sell him because you're selling low. And basically this message goes for both sides. Stop trying to buy low on these massive dynasty fallers that you think you're getting a super discount. Basically, you're getting out of this bargain bin shop and you're going to have a massive surge in dynasty value because they were a first round pick in last year's class. And conversely, stop trying to hold on to this asset that you think can recoup value when the reality is there is a whole lot more of a free fall that can come for these type of players. So the Keep Trade Cut data goes back to 2020. So for the 2019 class, I don't actually have the data on what their dynasty value was at the time they were drafted. So we can start in that May of 2020 for the 2019 class. So while I can't actually say if there were certain players that fell by a little bit here or there in the 2019 class, what I can tell you is there were 3 receivers in the 2019 class that undoubtedly lost a ton of value from the time they were drafted going into their second year. When we take a look, those guys are N'Keal Harry, Paris Campbell, and then McCole Hardman. Then starting at the 2020 class, I have the data from the time that they were drafted, and then taking a look a full year out. Of the players that lost value over that time, there was in 2020, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jalen Reagor lost some dynasty value. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was down 23 spots, went from overall player 10 to overall player 33. Jalen Reagor, massive face planner as well, went from overall player 71 when he was drafted to 119, so down 48 spots. Then you take a look the following year, Trevor Lawrence was down some, overall player 14 to 29. Urban Meyer was the coach. That team was a disaster, but overall still was inside of the top 30. People really believed in the talent of Trevor Lawrence, and you could realistically point to that situation being a disaster, so his value didn't lose a ton. You have Justin Fields, overall player 22 to overall 36, and then you have Travis Etienne, who was down 5 spots, but realistically that isn't really much in dynasty value. Pretty much stayed even keel, especially for the fact that he didn't play the entire season. In his rookie year, he got hurt with that Lisfranc injury. Then you have in the 2022 class, Treylon Burks went from overall player 39 when he was drafted to going into a full year removed, was overall player 74, down 35 spots. Jameson Williams, we knew that he was hurt coming in when he drafted him. He was overall player 52 and was down 18 spots, overall player 70. And then Sky Moore was overall player 78 in May. He went down to overall player 146. You had Bryce Young in his rookie season in May, was overall player 26. He went down to the following May, overall player 76. So he was down 50 spots. Then you have JSN, overall player 39 to overall player 58, down 19 spots. Addison similarly was overall 57 down to 74, and then Charbonnet went from 101 to overall 131, down 30 spots. Of those players, 9 of them were at the wide receiver position, and there's some varying degrees as far as the fall in Dynasty when you take a look a year later. And when you think about their Dynasty value a full year removed essentially in May, basically the hype and buzz around that incoming rookie class, it makes sense some of these players are going to fall a little bit. And basically when you filter out the players that didn't fluctuate a whole lot or didn't lose a ton of dynasty value in year one, we're going to be getting to the point of face planners. And now a face planner by definition is someone that doesn't produce in year one. But when you take a look at that as well as a massive loss in dynasty value, I think it's important to talk about face planners and essentially from the aspect of dynasty value, not wanting to sell low on these players that you think right now because you drafted them just a year ago with a premium pick in the first round and now are worth maybe a second or lower as far as dynasty value goes, so you don't want to sell them. But ultimately, recouping some of that value lost, I think, is the best play. And basically, when you take a look at the dynasty value attached to, by definition, face planners, guys that really did shitty in their rookie season, the value insulation around those players really thins out. Essentially, those guys don't retain value anywhere near as long as they used to in the past when we take a look at all this data. And it starts with Quentin Johnson in this most recent class. Now, for me, I actually pivoted out of 2 shares of Quentin Johnson essentially after week 2. One of the most concerning things for me with Quentin Johnson was early on, he literally wasn't hardly getting on the field at all. He basically was playing less than 20% of snaps. So going into week 3, I actually traded 2 of my Quentin Johnson shares for Puka Nacua, which at the time, he was the opposite, a guy who was a late round draft pick and on the rise. And ultimately, a lot of those type of guys going into week 3, I'm not really looking to buy because those guys are probably shown some flash, but ultimately we take a look at the hit rates overall and even in dynasty value we talked about. But with Puka Nacua, I was willing to kind of go against the grain because one, Quentin Johnson was reminding me a lot of Sky Moore. When I took a look at all the players in the first round in ADP from 2019 to 2023, there were some players that played more than others. Sky Moore and Quentin Johnson were the only players that were playing essentially 20% of snap range or less in those first 2 weeks and essentially early on in the season. Even some players that didn't play as much as you wanted to early on were getting on the field a lot more than that. Essentially, being healthy but not getting on the field, that is a massive red flag for me, especially when you're talking about Quentin Johnson, a first-round NFL draft pick, or Sky Moore, a second-round NFL draft pick. And again, talking about years past, 2019 to 2020, that's 4 and 5 years removed from now, right? 50% of those first-round picks are cooked. They're outside of the top 150. And then in the 2021 and 2022 class, you have 25% of the players that are outside of the top 250. So you have 3 players in each of those classes, which are totally cooked in dynasty value. Then when you talk again in 2023, you only have 1 player outside the top 50. That's Quentin Johnson. So essentially a full year removed from roughly the time that rookie drafts were happening. So May of the following season, you have Quentin Johnson, overall player 155. He was the 108 in rookie drafts. You have Sky Moore in the 22 class was the 110. He was overall player 146 a full year removed. Then you have in 2020, Jalen Reagor. He was the 111 in that class. He was the 119 a full year removed, May of the following year. And then in 2019, you have 3 of these players. McCole Hardman was overall player 118. Paris Campbell was overall player 103. And N'Keal Harry was overall player 94. N'Keal Harry was the 104, and then Campbell was the 112, and McCole Hardman was the 109. When you take a look at these players, these are the type of assets that I think it's really important to recoup value on as early as possible, even if you feel like it wasn't all that long that you used the first round pick on that player. Being able to let go and try to recoup some of the value, I think, is a huge point here. And then when you take a look at Sky Moore, again, a player that was not getting on the field early on in his career, and essentially his dynasty value, and essentially he just bled dynasty value. And then when you take a look, two of the things to really consider for Quentin Johnson and Sky Moore, both of these players, they went to really good landing spots, or landing spots that people thought were really good because of the presence of Justin Herbert, as well as the presence of Patrick Mahomes. So keeping that in mind, but also the dynasty community as far as the player's talent wasn't really overly bullish. Both Quentin Johnson and Sky Moore, when they were drafted, they weren't inside of the top 50 overall dynasty assets. And with these face planners, what I want to actually do is go through and show you real trades that happened in leagues for these players so that you kind of have an idea and things that you can do to pivot out of these assets. And while it's not necessarily a lot of fun to talk about trading away a lot of these young players that you have a lot of hope for in dynasty, the truth is a lot of them are going to hit their peak somewhere in year 1 or year 2 of their dynasty career. Now, of these 60 picks, only 10 of them increased in value between their second season and going into year 3. Players were James Cook, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Travis Etienne, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, A.J. Brown, and DK Metcalf. Now, of all those players, one thing that you don't see in there are any of these face planners. Essentially, all the players that went up, even if they did dip in value from the time they were drafted going into their second season, none of those players were absolutely horrendous on the field, aside from potentially Trevor Lawrence. But Trevor Lawrence was viewed as generational, and that situation was pretty unique with them having Urban Meyer and that completely disaster of a situation that they were in. All these other players weren't terrible in their rookie season. A lot of them actually showed out pretty well. Guys like DK Metcalf, who really finished the year strong, especially in the playoffs going into his second season. Now, here are some deals I pulled. These are within the last month for Quentin Johnson. Now, I'm not sure if in your league you can get these specific deals done, but just some ideas to think about. If you have Quentin Johnson and you're unsure if you should trade him or not, I absolutely would advocate for trading him. History is not on his side. And we take a look here. Some of the deals that have gotten done recently are pretty surprising to me here. This one is Chris Godwin being acquired for Quentin Johnson in the 310. I know Chris Godwin doesn't have the upside he once did, but the 310 in Quentin Johnson feels pretty cheap for a guy like Chris Godwin. Stephon Diggs going into this new situation in Houston. People aren't really sure what to make of that situation, but it's Stephon Diggs in a third being acquired for Quentin Johnson in a second. This is definitely a trade I would be willing to make, even if it is for an aging Stephon Diggs who's not that happy. Quentin Johnson in a second for Amari Cooper. I've been on record saying I would buy Amari Cooper for a second-round pick basically anywhere, and Quentin Johnson being attached to that second-round pick doesn't change it for me at all. Would absolutely take the Amari Cooper side of that trade, even though he's a lot older in Dynasty than Quentin Johnson is. And even a trade like this here, Quentin Johnson straight up for Jerome Ford. Nick Chubb is working out, and he could be a freak athlete that defies the odds. But a guy like Jerome Ford last year was very usable in fantasy, and I think that his situation this year could be very similar. Would much rather just have Jerome Ford built into my running back room currently on some of my dynasty teams than having Quentin Johnson on them. And believe it or not, there was all kinds of trades where people were sending future second-round picks for Quentin Johnson. And I think with this information, also combining that with last week's video about second-round rookie picks and having the majority of second-round rookie picks actually going to increase in value, the players you draft there, pivoting into a second-round pick for Quentin Johnson, for me, still feels like a steal. And then you take a look at Sky Moore. Very similar case. Because he was attached to Patrick Mahomes and people remembered that Kansas City used a second-round pick on him, and he was a first-round pick in the class prior, people thought they were buying low on Sky Moore for a second-round pick. And ultimately right now, I can almost guarantee you they would rather have a second-round pick in any class, no matter what year in the future, than they would have Sky Moore on their team. And you take a look at some trades from N'Keal Harry, a full year removed from his rookie season. Basically, you used to be able to trade these face planners for a lot more than you can right now. And basically, I would like to trade away these first-round picks that are treading the wrong way and looking like face planners earlier in the game than later, even if I end up being wrong and these players actually do completely turn it around and end up being really good dynasty assets. A lot of times I can pivot out of what I got and recouped from those players and make that maybe not quite as valuable as that player that really all of a sudden skyrocketed out of nowhere, but basically doing that in process more often than not, I'm probably ahead in the long game, but I'm also going to be able to try to find a way to maneuver that future draft pick that I got in a different trade later on. So basically I'm trying to keep this dynasty value alive as opposed to letting this player ride on my team and eventually become nothing. Now, even if you're not going to be like me and trade away Quentin Johnson before we get to week 3, I completely understand that. And I'm not saying that that's something that you really have to lean into doing. But even if you don't do that and you're not trading away some of these first round draft picks within the first month or two of their rookie season, even if you get to a full year removed from their rookie season, you take a look at some of these values, you're still able to pivot at that point off of these players and get back some dynasty value. So keep all that in mind. I hope this video really helped you out. Let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments. I'll see you back here, same time, same place, talking more dynasty strategy and trades next week. I'm out of here. Peace.